If you want to know how I created a video essay that got over 800,000 views without having to do tons of research, then register for my free video essay training webinar with the link in the description. The amount of attendants are limited to the first 70 people, so make sure you hit the link and reserve your seat now. Dream Theater was a band formed in 1985, originally under the name Majesty. John Petrucci, John Myung, and Mike Portnoy met while attending Berklee College of Music in Boston. They later decided to drop out of school and focus more on their band. That later proved to be a great choice, as their newly renamed band, Dream Theater, would go on to become one of the most revered progressive rock and metal bands of modern times. Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from a Memory, is regarded as one of their most beloved albums. It's the band's first concept album, and therefore played a big role in establishing them as progressive rock lords. But after all, there are tons of great concept albums out there. So what made this one stick out? Let's take a closer look. After the release of Images and Words, many fans requested the band to make a sequel to Metropolis Part 1, the fifth track on the album. The band never intended to make a follow-up despite of the suggestive title, but during the Falling into Infinity sessions in '97, the band did record a 21-minute long instrumental demo that featured several citations and motifs from Part 1. But the demo was quite different from what the finished recording would sound like. Now, the band members were introduced to Jordan Rudess through a collaboration in the revolving door prog rock project Liquid Tension Experiment. John and Mike enjoyed making music with Jordan and convinced the other band members to let him join as a full-time keyboardist. Their current keyboardist, Derek Sherinian, was fired shortly after. The band lineup at this point was made up of James Labrie, John Petrucci, Jordan Rudess, John Myung, and Mike Portnoy. The guys started to record their new album at Beer Track Studios in Suffern, New York, the place where they'd previously recorded Images and Words in '91 and A Change of Seasons in '95.
And now here we are in 1999, the road we are traveling to create the latest and I think greatest Dream Theater masterpiece. And here is Bear Track Studios.
On a bit of a side note, when thinking about this era of Dream Theater, I think Mike Portnoy, the drummer, was way ahead of his time when he made vlogs about their recording sessions. This was back in 1999, and video logs weren't really popular on YouTube until the 2010s. Hell, YouTube didn't even exist back then. So this shows just how much they were willing to put together in order to provide for their fans.
We're hard at work on this new album. It's coming out amazing. I'm going to take you inside for a quick little tour and a quick hello from the other guys.
As Falling into Infinity became a commercial failure, their record label decided to give the band even more freedom with their next album, allowing them to flesh out the story introduced on Metropolis Part 1. In Part 1, we're introduced to a woman going through a phase of pain. There's instances of death and reincarnation mentioned in the lyrics, and these themes became the building blocks of the concept of Scenes from a Memory. Now, if you've never listened to this album before and you don't know the story, there will be spoilers ahead, so keep that in mind. The story is about a man called Nicholas and the discovery of his past life. The plot was heavily inspired by the 1991 film Dead Again, a movie that also deals with the idea of reincarnation.
The album was, like I said, it's a concept album. It's written in the style of a movie, so we decided to just kind of push it in that direction. Obviously the band's called Dream Theater, and it's kind of cool to make it a little more dramatic than usual.
Now the album's songs is divided into two acts. The first act opens up with Nicholas going through past life regression therapy. We hear the sound of a clock ticking while the therapist leads him into a state of hypnosis. He counts down from 10, and that's how the album begins.
With each breath, you become more relaxed.
In this state of hypnosis, he starts remembering things. He sees this girl named Victoria and oddly familiar places and events, although he's never been there or experienced any of it before. As the album progresses, we learn that Nicholas is the reincarnation of Victoria and that she was murdered.
Hello, Victoria, so glad to see you, my friend.
Nicholas then starts to believe that Victoria is haunting him to reveal the truth about her murder. Nicholas learns that Victoria distanced herself from her lover, Julian, because of his issues with drugs and gambling. In distress, she finds comfort with Julian's brother, Edward, and begins an affair with him. At this point, the listener and Nicholas are enticed to believe that Julian murdered her out of jealousy and then committed suicide. This especially comes to light when Nicholas finds a newspaper article containing a witness testimony that supports this story.
Headline, murder, young girl killed.
But things aren't really that simple. Nicholas begins to doubt this story when he gets in contact with an old man who is more familiar with this case. Soon enough, he realizes that he will never get on with his life if he doesn't solve the mystery of Victoria's murder. And this is where Act 2 starts. In the beginning, we hear more about Julian's addiction to drugs and gambling. Edward feels guilty about his affair with his brother's lover, but concludes that his love outweighs his guilt.
He's my brother, but I love her.
In his state of hypnosis, Nicholas decides to visit Edward's old house, and when doing so, he finds another clue to what he believes will solve the mystery. Julian had begged Victoria for forgiveness, and when rebuffed, killed both her and Edward. He then positioned himself as the witness in the newspaper article. In the end, Nicholas puts his memories to rest. The therapist ends the session despite of pleas from Victoria's memories. The story then cuts to Edward's perspective, and it's revealed that he wanted to have something more than just an affair with Victoria. She decides to forgive Julian, but as this is happening, Edward confronts them and murders them. He then stages the scene as the witness in the paper, and this sudden flashback that Nicholas is getting includes a dialogue piece where Edward tells Victoria to open her eyes before he kills her. This echoes the exact same words that the hypnotherapist is using as Nicholas is opening his eyes.
Open your eyes, Nicholas.
In the very end of the album, Nicholas arrives in his body after a long journey through the memories of his past life. He walks back home, turns off the TV, puts on a vinyl, and sits down to relax. Nicholas is startled when the hypnotherapist asks him to open his eyes once again.
Open your eyes, Nicholas.
The album cuts to a phonographic static, something that confused a lot of listeners. The band later explained that the hypnotherapist is the reincarnation of Edward, and that he killed Nicholas to complete the cycle once again. As you can see, it's a really interesting story. It's very cinematic, and it echoes so many classical tragedy films about love and murder, but also pivotal concept albums like The Wall, Sgt. Pepper, and The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. The story and the lyrics on this album isn't the only thing that makes this a great album though. Dream Theater is a band with some of the most technically skilled musicians on the planet,
All the members play their instruments with a sense of mastery in every single moment. And sure, music doesn't only come down to skill, but on this album and many of their other albums, for that sake, it makes the band even more authentic. Their range of abilities adds colors to their music in a sense that very few others manage to replicate.
Now, this year is Scenes from a Memory's 20th anniversary, and for those of you who don't know already, Dream Theater will perform this album live throughout the entire year. So if you're a hardcore fan, but never seen them live for some reason, then this might be the perfect timing to buy a ticket and go and see them. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you want to know how I created a video essay that got over 800,000 views without having to do tons of research, then register for my free video essay training webinar with the link in the description. The amount of attendants are limited to the first 70 people, so make sure you hit the link right now to reserve your seat.